Which languages are spoken in Norway and Iceland? I'll tell you in this video. Both Iceland and Norway are both Nordic countries that has a lot of history and culture. And both countries are the land of the Vikings, and they share a common history. But the differences are quite huge, especially when it comes to the language. A big misconception I hear is that people think that Norway and Iceland are super similar. But that's a misconception, because Iceland is not even part of Scandinavia. Scandinavia is just Norway, Sweden, and Denmark. That's it. I guess we don't want to involve other countries here. We just want to keep our small Scandinavian, small little tiny group here. On the other hand, while the Nordic countries is a bigger group of countries, and here is where Iceland also is. Which brings us to the questions. Icelanders speak Icelandic, Norwegians speak Norwegian. So Icelandic is the official language of Iceland. It has its roots from the Germanic language and is spoken by most people living there. Iceland actually has its roots in the old Norse Viking language, and it's pretty cool, and it has still to this day a lot of similarities to that language, because the Vikings were a big part of Iceland. Something really cool is that Icelandic is really different from the other Scandinavian languages. Why? Because the other Scandinavian languages started to evolve from the old Norse language. But since Iceland was so isolated, they developed their own kind of weird stuff, weird language that they speak over there. Like, why? This was also because they're really isolated over there, because it's an island. So of course, I don't blame them. I will do the same. So that's why actually Icelandic is more close to the Norse Old Viking language. Look at this. For example, the letters thorn and eighth are pretty similar to the Old Norse language. Good job, Iceland, for keeping the Viking culture alive. What about other languages? Do they speak English in Iceland, and can they communicate with others? Actually, the answer is this. Iceland has just a small population of 350,000 people, which means that it's difficult to speak Icelandic outside of Iceland because it's just a small population. So what happens here is that they're forced to learn English in school, of course, to be able to communicate with others, which shows us that over 90% of Icelandic people speak good English. So Iceland has just one official language, Icelandic. So what about learning Icelandic? What are the challenges and difficulties? Even though it's a Germanic language, it's not at all easy to learn. Of course, it depends on what languages you already speak. I'm assuming you speak English since you're watching this video. Actually, they ranked this language 3 out of 4 and how difficult it was. 4 is the maximum difficulty, and Icelandic is ranked as number 3, which makes it a really difficult language to learn. They're saying it takes about 1100 hours to reach fluency in this language. So the challenges with Icelandic is mainly two things: the pronunciation and the vowels that are hard to pronounce. What are other challenges with Icelandic? First is the pronunciation of the Icelandic language that is difficult. And number 2, it has a lot of difficult vowels in the language. Of course, all languages comes with its sets of difficulties, and I think Icelandic, these are the two biggest ones they have. And the opportunity for you to learn Icelandic is that you can connect with a completely new culture and a rich history of Vikings. Alright guys, so what about the language spoken in Norway? Norwegian is one of the languages they use to speak in Norway, but it's by far the most used one. There are actually 2 official written languages in Norwegian, Nynorsk and Bokmål. But with Norway having a lot of different dialects, you will often find that each dialect is a mix between those 2 written languages. Norwegian, the national language. Norwegian is a mix of several other languages, for example, from Old Norse. That's why Norwegian and Icelandic has some similarities, since they're both from Norse. You see, Denmark used to rule over Norway for over 400 years. That's why Norwegian and Danish is really similar. Yes, Denmark used to rule over us. Yeah, we're forgiving them already. It's fine, don't worry. And actually, if you look into written Danish and written Norwegian, they are so similar that even me sometimes I having difficult to distinguish the two languages. And finally, in 1814, we managed to free ourselves from the Danes. But then the Swedes took over and we became a part of Sweden. So that brings us into, that's why Norwegian and Swedish are also really similar. Like Iceland, we also have a really small population in Norway. A little bit more, around 5 million, which is a little bit better, but not great. So this brings us into the fact that you don't find Norwegian outside of Norway. You have to learn English in school because if not, well, we cannot communicate with anyone else. Same thing here, around 90% of Norwegians speak good English. Other than that, something that you might not know is that Norway has one other official language, the Sami language, spoken by the indigenous people of Norway. Something is really important to tell her is that Norway in 1970, we found oil and become really rich. That attracted a lot of people from especially Poland, Pakistan and some Arabic countries. And those countries brought their own language into our language. So when they came to our country, they brought a lot of slang, language and culture into Norway. That's why you can hear Norway sometimes has some English, some Arabic and some other languages, which is pretty cool to see. Learning Norwegian, challenges and opportunities. They are categorizing Norwegian as a category 1 language, which makes it a lot easier to learn. With only 600 hours of studying, you can become fluent in this language. Norwegian is a lot more similar to English, so that's why it's a lot easier to learn. Even though Norwegian is easier, it takes effort and time to learn the language. If you want to learn Norwegian, just invest a little bit of time every day to find some resources, learn some grammar, and it's really important that you find someone to speak with if you want to learn this language. In Norwegian Community's conversation classes, we'll take you from 0 to fluent in Norwegian in just 3 to 4 months. Alright, so let's compare the Icelandic and the Norwegian language. Are they similar? Can we understand each other? Let's find out. Do they speak Norwegian in Iceland and vice versa? So, no, they don't speak Icelandic in Norway and they don't speak Norwegian in Iceland. Although it comes from the North Germanic language, there are some similar words, but in general, it's really different. And me as a Norwegian, I cannot understand Icelandic when they speak. I can pick up maybe 1% of the vocabulary and I can understand something, but it's really difficult and I cannot speak anything. And it's the same for them with our language. A big similarity we have in Norwegian and Icelandic is that we're both a SVO language, which means we have the same structure of a subject and then a verb on the second place and an object. Something else we have in common are the nouns. We have 3 genders of the nouns: masculine, feminine, and the neutral nouns. And something else we have is that the adjectives has to match the rest of the sentence. So if I'm speaking about nouns in plural, I have to adapt the adjective to the noun, if you understand. So my point there is that our sentence structure and some rules are the same in Norwegian and Icelandic, but the vocabulary is really different. Let's look at the big differences between the Norwegian and Icelandic language. So my point there is that Norwegian and Icelandic have a lot of similarities in their sentence structure and their vocabulary, actually. So let's look at some vocabulary that are similar in Norwegian and Icelandic. So my point here is this: Norwegian and Icelandic have a lot of similarities in sentence structure. Vocabulary is really different. But I'll show you something funny here because I picked out some words that are really similar to each other in Norwegian and Icelandic. Let's take a look at this list right here. Let's take the word father in English. In Norwegian we say far. In Icelandic we say fader, which is quite similar to English and Norwegian. I don't know if my pronunciation was correct there in Icelandic, but something like that. Alright, let's take the word mountain. In Norwegian is fjell. In Icelandic is fjall. What if you want to travel to either Norway or Iceland? If you want to travel there, you can just speak English. There's no worries. Everyone will be super nice to you and try to help you and just do their best. You'll be really respected also then. If you want to work there, on the other hand, I think it's a really good idea to learn the language there for several reasons. First of all, because you will have so much more opportunities if you actually do it. if you learn a language. A lot of people would just, a lot of companies would just put that, require you to actually learn a language and have that in your resume to be able to work there, of course. And I think for me, myself, I've been living in both Spain and Italy, and I just really wanted to learn the language out of respect for the country, because I think when you live somewhere, it just shows a lot of respect to at least try to learn the language as best as you can. All right, that was the end of the video. I hope you liked it. I hope you gained some insights in Norwegian and Icelandic and some history maybe and some vocabulary maybe. And thank you for watching. Vi ses i nästa video. Kos deg!